Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Conscious Health Podcast. Thank you very much, David, my co host, for being here today. And today we are really looking at this is the sixth episode, and it is titled What are Archetypes and How Do They Help You Transform? Now, David, I know you've recently written a paper about this, which will match this. Could you define what is an archetype? First of all,
Yeah, well, archetypes are just these fundamental and universal patterns that can be seen as symbols, and they are also part of a collective unconscious, and they are part of the society, they are part of your country, they are part of your family, and of course they are part of your most intimate caregivers and relationships that you have. And they were proposed, not discovered, because this is just wisdom, and this is just
hmm
some patterns that are going to be reflected, but it was proposed by Carl Jung, all of these different types of archetypes, and they are deeply embedded in our behavior, in how we behave, and they have, of course, influences in rituals, they have social interactions, and they can have personal development depending on how we use them. If we use them wisely and if we detect what we are doing in our lives, we are going to really get some traction and transform the way we are relating to the world and having different relationships. If we use them in, let's say, the shadow form, which is the your opportunity to grow, these are more like, well, they can become toxic. They can give you, of course, uh, different kind of symptoms. Let's say you develop some kind of uh, sentiment of feeling stuck in your life, sometimes having struggles, sometimes trying to people please, sometimes trying to
mm.
be too needy, or all of those things are different kind of patterns that we are going to reflect. And they also are seen as instinctive, sorry, reactions to certain situations, and many times they operate independently of you being conscious. That's why many times we fall into these patterns without noticing. For example, the most common that comes to my mind is playing the victim. No,
Mm.
that's a pattern that many times has been showing up in our lives and in the world, and it is used many times as a form of manipulation and also as a form of um, trying to attract attention to yourself. And it's just something that you learn by example, that you witness when you were a child, and sometimes you are playing it and you don't even notice that you are doing it. So that's, I think, the easiest way to define them.
So would you say that they are kind of like belief systems or conditioning that we've perhaps inherited from our parents and from society, from like you say, from our cultures and from the countries that we live in as well. So, for example, me being Portuguese and South African and living in the UK, there will be a lot of imprinting from these various cultures and aspects of who I am and what I do and what I unconsciously do
Mm-hmm.
as
Yes,
well.
yes.
Okay, so from an ancestral and intergenerational perspective, I tend to, when I'm working in the Akashic records, there is the aspect of when the soul incarnates, we choose the different themes, I suppose, the different archetypes that we want to experience or move from. And a lot of the times we end up picking specifically these our parents because their genetics hold all those kind of like if you were to think of it as a palette for the
Mhm.
painting that we're about to draw, so all the colors, the good, the dark, the light, the dark, all shades of, because I don't see them any as being bad, but it's really that and then we're brought into that environment, absolutely, which kind of like I think molds our physicality. But the soul chooses all those kind of like perimeters in order to work with them and to overcome them depending on the theme that the soul wants to experience, which I think is quite beautiful in that sense, even up to choosing the genes of what we look like, in order to navigate this world as well. So I think that plays a very, very big part where we start to see those intergenerational traumas being played again, or those habits, or those mindsets that we seem to carry with us, whether it be of a victim or whether it be of, a people pleaser or whatever it may be, or needing to take responsibility for other people's actions, no matter what it may be. I think we tend to, it gets imprinted into our personality, which creates those, I think, archetypes that you might be speaking of. Does that make any, have I got it right?
Yes, yes, and it's so interesting this knowledge and this kind of seeing life because it is just defining or having a label on
Mm-hmm.
each of these forms on how we behave, and of course we know without knowing that this word exists or without not having this knowledge, we know that we have masks. We know that
Mm-hmm.
we many times behave according to the place and the people that we are around. So we are playing this game all the time. So if I am speaking it here, I am trying to be as much as possible authentic.
Mm-hmm.
I want to share the things that I'm talking about, but I know that the audience of the podcast is going to receive this kind of knowledge in a different way than if I speak with my friends. So if I am with my friends, I cannot speak about those things because many of them won't understand or won't be interested. And then you should speak about other things that you can
Mm-hmm.
relate to. Or if I am teaching a class in the school, I have to be in a position of a teacher and I have to teach the syllabus that I have and all of those things. So we always play this game of masks, and
Mm-hmm.
in this case, the archetypes go beyond this mask
Mm-hmm.
because they are embedded, as I mentioned, in our subconscious mind, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as we don't want to behave like our parents, and we criticize many things of our parents, we are playing those archetypes many times.
Absolutely.
And if we don't realize that we are doing that, we can follow the same pattern of behavior and we can fall into the same, let's say, mistakes, no? Because we are afraid sometimes of this word of mistake, making a mistake. But
Mm.
it's much better to recognize that you are mistaken and that you did something wrong, whether it was because you didn't know how to do it better, or whether it is because you were unconscious. But recognizing that you are doing a mistake gives you the consciousness that you can correct your your way of behaving or doing the things, and probably you are still on many times you are still on time to make those corrections in your path of life. And that's the important thing about these archetypes, that they, many times they guide us towards where we want to go, And many times we have to use some of them so that we can move forward, no?
Absolutely. But and from another perspective of that is that, well, there's two things I want to talk about with regards to that. Is one, for example, the intergenerational diseases that we're more prone to, that show up for us is important from that spiritual perspective as it gets passed down to us, as we start to wear those masks, as we continue to ingrain those patterns, whether it's conscious or unconscious, it tends to show up. So, for example, I tend to see, and obviously this is a generalization, that a lot of the times, depending on, say, for example, if cancer shows up within our bodies, that it is suppressed anger. And a lot of the times, it's depending on where it is, will indicate where the suppression is. And so, for example, a lot of the times when we're looking at the aspect of breast cancer, it's really about a suppression of wearing that mask of what it means to be feminine and not being able to express ourselves completely and fully, which creates a lot of frustration and resentment within us that is then carried from the generations, which then ends up, like you say, our minds and what we put into our bodies and everything has a more likelihood that if we don't deal with that anger, that resentment, that we don't even know is conditionally being passed down to us, that it reflects within our bodies. And I think that's why we're more prone to some diseases or not. And perhaps you can talk to that as well. And then the other thing is when we look at recognizing the mistakes, or I call them patterns, that we've been kind of like, doing, they serve us to a certain point, which is why they're unconscious. And when they become conscious, it's because they don't serve us anymore. So perhaps being a victim has served somebody to the point to where they are ready to let go of it, and then they don't need that anymore as they move past that. But it's realizing, okay, where is that coming in? And in my world, we tend to see it showing up in all areas of our lives, right? When we start looking at, why is everybody being a victim? Like, why? Like, what's going on? But usually that's a reflection within us and starting to look at, okay, where am I being the victim? In what area of my life, whether it be business, relationships, friendships, or whatever it may be. I mean, that came up for me once, and I can give an example where I
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of people bringing in the aspect of control. And I'm usually the most easiest going. Like, I tend to be, I think, I tend to be quite easygoing and relaxed and going with the flow. And that in itself has its limitations as well. And that's the other thing. I feel that everything has a scale of too easygoing is not great either, right? And I was being faced with a lot of people trying to control, which really it started being kind of like, what is going on with me? And then I started to reflect and using this method. Where am I? Where am I? Where am I? Where am I? Where am I controlling? And then I realized that I wasn't controlling enough. I was like letting my accounting kind of like, I was like, in my business, and I was like, okay, maybe I need to hire a bookkeeper because, you know, I'm that I need, there's sometimes it's not even it's sometimes people come to show us how to be as well. So it's like, you
Mm-hmm.
can't be laxy daisy with all of this, right? And perhaps you need to be more controlling in whatever it may be, kind of like, or more disciplined in one way or another. But the lack of control, in a sense, or that easygoing aspect of me served me in a way of adapting to many things and many situations and many people. I mean, I think I'm still pretty easygoing, but it's with that aspect of tweaking. But these patterns tend to start showing up for us in many areas of our lives, whether it be in friendships, whether it be in business, whether it be in our work, our colleagues, our friendships, our parents, wherever it may be. These tend to show us how to move through them. And a lot of the times, the advice that we get in the Akashic records, even if we do realize these mistakes or these patterns, is not to beat ourselves up or judge ourselves based on that. It's more of a kind of like an understanding, one of those, aha, okay, oh my goodness, I've been doing this all my life. I've been overpromising and under-delivering. I've been busy, whatever, hiding within that. It's how do I change that moving forward? It's not about the judgment. It's like, it's the realization, it's the understanding of it. It's the forgiveness aspect, but taking that knowledge forward and saying, okay, I can't do this anymore. I need to do it in this way, or I need to change my thought patterns, my emotions, my behaviors to shift that pattern or that archetype.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
there is that point where it serves you until it doesn't anymore, because perhaps it's survival, perhaps it's kept you safe, perhaps it's all but that's the conditioning that has been passed down. But it gets to a point where, like, when you're ready to let go of it, you see it, which is
Mm-hmm.
beautiful from my perspective. In that way, it's beautiful to see and recognize when that happens. And usually it happens when we go through like traumatic experiences. So I learned so much during my divorce and my move and all sorts of things. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't believe I'd been doing all of this stuff that was just unconscious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is all those let's say nuggets of wisdom that you gave that many times they are structures in the end. They are these kind of structures that we need in our mental way of thinking, and it also have this blended language of the soul, because
Mm-hmm.
as you mentioned many times, you use certain archetype, it works for you in a period of time or for certain purposes, and then your soul starts speaking and it starts showing you examples or luring
Mm-hmm.
people so that you can see that it's no longer working and you have to shift in order to grow or expand and discover a different way that you are that you can be. No, they provide
Mm-hmm.
guidance, they provide this insight, and they contribute many times to our mental health, because if we don't have also those kind of structures, we would be randomly doing things that of course can damage a lot of people, although some
Yeah.
of these archetypes are also have the dark side, let's say, but they can guide our behavior. They promote that we know ourselves, self knowledge. They provide
Mm-hmm.
these cultural and symbolic connections, because we need those connections also with certain kind of people, and the integration of these patterns into our life is essential to achieving this balance, this psychological balance that you can have. And as you mentioned, many times these most deep connected relationships, whether it is your partner, your couple, your children, your parents,
Yeah.
all of them reflect to you what you need to start working on. And
Mm-hmm.
this is what for me is just amazing, that we have these mirrors constantly in our life, that they are supposed to help us. And I was also, when I was reading the science part of these archetypes, it is also related to this quantum psychology, that this is a new
Mm-hmm.
branch, let's say new branch of psychology that integrates these quantum processes into how we think, how we learn, and how these mental phenomena are just replicating over time. And it views the biology of us, instead
Mm-hmm.
of just being these chemical structures, it shows us, or it has a structure of a bioelectronic device.
Mm-hmm.
We work as computers many times. We work as these models that we have now of artificial intelligence, because we store information, we manage the information, and we retrieve certain memories and things that are going to help us. So in another way, we are an archaic way of artificial intelligence that has a lot of knowledge, and now that's why we need to create this artificial intelligence, because it is now many times we can outsource now to this kind of intelligence, and we can focus on knowing more about ourselves, on knowing more in a deeper level how this ancestral lineage works, these epigenetic mechanisms work also, because you were
Mm-hmm.
mentioning also the diseases. And those are crucial to understand this role of the archetypes also. Let's say that for me, now that I have read this information, these archetypes are like the epigenetic marks of psychology.
Mm-hmm.
So we have these psychology archetypes, which are mainly influenced by the environment, the culture, and all of those things, the collective.
Mm-hmm.
And the epigenetic marks are influenced by the biology of 7 generations or more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I tend to look at that, and whenever we make changes within ourselves, it affects the epigenetic
Mhm.
frequencies, which is very interesting from my perspective because, again, I use the tool very much, the Akashic records and craniosacral therapy and Reiki and all the rest of that. And I remember that conversation that I had with you when we first met in Houston. And I was like, oh my God, David, we should test the blood after we've done like Reiki to it to see if anything changes or, if we
Mhm.
start to change our behavior, which is pretty cool. But going completely on a kind of like, I suppose, a spiritual health perspective, I find myself very recently, I tend to see the body as code, like you say, as computer code. So there's zeros and ones, and sometimes it's in gold, sometimes it's in green. And when I'm doing kind of like a lot of the healings and a lot of the work that I'm doing, I'm asking to revert the code, which because I have an IT background, like I work for a lot of technical companies as well. It's just how I tend to imagine things. But I asked to reset the program of the cells to its original healthy cell in that sense. And a lot of the times I find my clients get very tired in the sense of what we call in our world integrating those new codes to start to create healthier cells. But we tend to look at it from a more of an energetic perspective to shift the frequency of the body. That coupled with the behavior changes and the outlooks and the thought processes, I tend to see a bigger shift when that happens and when we're looking at that. So I don't know if that has any validity in the 3D world yet. I definitely see it more of like the mental emotional aspect, which then the heaviest form is the body, which is the 3D form. And when things are found in the body, it's usually the last protocol, because I also believe that it goes through a belief systems, the thought patterns, the emotions, the food we put in our body, the actions that we do. Eventually, it presents itself in the body. So it's the body's, a lot of the times, the last protocol. So looking at, for where I get interested is, where did it all begin? What is the belief system, which plugs into the whole intergenerational, the lineage, the ancestors that is plugged in there. And then also knowing that the soul has that choice and our children choose us because of these themes that this lineage can supply. My question for you really is, have you started seeing a physical representation of the archetypes, in the body? So for example, like people that have arthritis, I tend to find that they're very much like perfectionists.
Mhm.
And they're either kind of like very rigid in their thinking and their belief systems, or they're the opposite, where they're extremely flexible. So when I start to see that over flexibility in joints and issues that start coming in, there is where you find a lot of people are too flexible. and they don't have boundaries and they people please. This seems to be a pattern and within their flexibility. And even if I look at the people that I know and their blueprints and looking at that, it a lot of the time tends to ring true. So have you found any of that physical representation in the body with a lot of the archetypes that you've worked with, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, psychological?
Yes, yes, I have seen many, many examples of people and these archetypes or emotions or behaviors that they are witnessing in their own home
Mm-hmm.
and how they influence them. And when I ask for kind a certain type of disease that they
Mm-hmm.
have in the family or they are already developing, I can notice that it completely makes sense to what happened to them in terms of this kind of controlling behavior sometimes or manipulation of their own
Mm-hmm.
parents or restriction of their own parents. I have a very good example that can work. I have a friend from the very long time, and
Mm-hmm.
I really just start assembling her case in the few months that I known her. She had a mom that was extremely strict in a way that when she was a teenager, she couldn't go out with certain friends. She had to lie many times, and she had to respect certain boundaries in terms of the timing. And she couldn't do anything on Sundays because Sundays was certain family thing that she had to do. So she was extremely restricted. So the mother had arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis,
Mm-hmm.
and she had it in a very advanced degree. And from there, she had many complications. And now, my friend, she has also arthritis because she was so restricted that she also looks for this kind of a structured way of living, and she's not flexible to know that she's extremely intelligent, but sometimes she
Mm-hmm.
doesn't even notice that because she has to follow that structure that has. So the archetype is so embedded in her that it already produced a disease. It already
Mm-hmm.
produced a way of being that is replicating the story of her mom. So, and many times she doesn't notice that because she's she's too rigid to see and to be open to our different way of thinking, no? And that's where these archetypes can damage us when we
Mm-hmm.
are so blind by them that we don't pay attention to what other people or life is trying to show us. That's when we can get into the dark side or the shadow side of this pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we ignite the genes, and that's when
Mm-hmm.
we ignite the biological processes that are going to replicate this information so that we express the disease.
Absolutely. And it's when we express the disease that we start to investigate why, which helps us to come full circle into looking at where did it start. Well, at least I hope so, because I think things are changing right now. Because before it was like, give me some sort of medicine and make it go away. Now the medicine is going, okay, what do I need to do physically, mentally, and emotionally to remove this condition or this disease or this discomfort within the body? Because a lot of the times, absolutely, pharmaceuticals can help in many cases, but if we don't look at the root cause of the issue, it's going to return, or
Yeah.
or it won't go away in the first place. Because a lot of the time, then I start to notice when my clients say, okay, I've got this, and they don't know what it is medically, I'm like, then it's spiritual or it's mental or it's emotional. It needs to definitely be had. Well, all of them are spiritual, mental, and emotional, but when we can't see that physical cause for it, then it is most definitely needing to look at things more in a holistic way, which I find
Yeah.
quite important. But it's pinpointing the disease is actually the body is so phenomenal because it's a last protocol. It's like, hey, you haven't listened. I've spoken to you. I've given you clues. I've asked you to slow down. I've asked you to look at this, and we've ignored it until the body eventually goes, nope, now you're going to have to deal with the whatever's going on. Um, but it's usually when people can't physically move anymore that we start looking and reflecting on our lives, the people around us, what we've been doing, what we need to change, what's working for us and what's not working for us. And that's the beauty of that shadow aspect of it, is because it forces us to stop and look at that archetype that is within us, look at those patterns, look at that conditioning, whether it was conscious or unconscious. And now, after you doing this work, because it never stops,
No.
whenever I discover a pattern, I'm like, oh my goodness, I've been doing this. And I'm like, huh. And then I look at my mom's behavior towards, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And then I remember my grandmother doing the same thing. And then I'm like, oh, I've done it to my children, kind of a thing. And then I'm like, and then I look at those patterns that have been kind of like replicated. So now what I do is that now that I recognize it, absolutely changing my behavior, that instead of beating myself up, I look at this time and I go, okay, like, how has it impacted my life? How has it impacted the people that I love? And now a lot of the times, like, I'll bring it up at dinner and I go, oh my goodness, I just recognize this pattern. And this is how my grandmother did it. This is how my mom does it, because my mom lives with me as well. And I'm
Mm.
like, oh, I'm so sorry. This is how I've done it to you girls. And do you see it replicated in your lives? And my two daughters are very, very different. But the one will be like, oh my goodness, I totally see that. And the other one's like, nope, she's got other genes in there somewhere. She's the other extreme,
Yeah.
which is beautiful, because that teaches us one way to come somewhere into the middle, because the pendulum always swings too far, right? So it's
Yeah.
beautiful in the sense of bringing it up not as a criticism or as a judgment, but more as an awareness, and thinking about, okay, how can I change this moving forward? What boundaries can I put in place for myself, or others, or what discipline, what do I need to shift, right? Like, and that's important. And it's beautiful by looking at our parents and what they have, to make sure that if we don't want to end up that way, that we change our behaviors. But if they do have those good behaviors, to really instill them within ourselves as well.
Yes. And I was also thinking of the perfect analogy in terms of the technology and what happened with
Mm-hmm.
me with this computer that I'm using now. As I told you, the computer start failing the screen, and then well,
Mm-hmm.
they changed the screen. Well, that was one step. Once they delivered to me, it didn't work the software. So the software
Mm-hmm.
had something, and the guy in the store explained me that this software, when it is installed, it has layers,
Yeah.
and probably one of the layers wasn't properly installed, and there were some bugs in the software, in one of the layers of the software, and it has to be replaced. So they put a new software. It didn't work. It had the same problem. So what I had to do is to reset completely the computer
Mm-hmm.
and start it as if it was new. So this is what happens in our lives.
Yeah.
Sometimes our screens fail. They don't
Mm-hmm.
work. We don't recognize the things that we are being reflected. So we need
No.
a change of the screen. We need a change of the screen. We need a certain new software, which is new thinking way.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we replace the thinking and it still doesn't work. We still
Hmm.
find struggles, we still find pain or even suffering. So that
Yeah.
means that it is a deeper layer of the software that was not installed properly. So you are not thinking properly in a deeper way. So you have to do
Yeah.
a deeper cleaning of probably your childhood experiences
Yeah.
and reflect on what happened to you when you were a child, how your parents treated you, all of those things. Once you do that work, then probably it will work. But if it doesn't work, if it's
Yeah.
still you find struggle, if still you find this suffering, that means that you have to shift into a completely new person. And you have to start from zero. And you have to be compassionate to yourself.
Mm.
Just take one at a time the things that you want to implement in your life. So probably that's the best way for us to behave. So technology is also reflecting to us what we need to
Absolutely.
do, what what are the layers that we need to clean, what are the layers that we need to
Mm.
reinstall in our system, and that information is stored and it's going to be decodified into a biology way of behaving.
Yeah.
That's how you are going to work and clean your diseases, and that's how they are cleaned in reality. You have to go to
Hmm.
the root cause, which is the deeper software layer. And once
Yeah.
you remove that, then things can work better.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I love that analogy. And I always say that when we reflect back on perhaps a trauma that we've experienced, if there is still an emotional charge to it, it means that there's still some healing that needs to be done on a deeper level.
Yes.
There's still some forgiveness, there's still some letting go, there's still some gratitude, there's still some learning from that experience that can support us moving forward. And then that's how we tend to see if there's still a program that's running in behind there that still needs to be updated. Is that if there's no emotional charge? So I hope for whoever's watching, I hope that will help to realize if there's still some software that needs to be reinstalled or rebooted in one way or another.
Yes, and what this also teaches us is that we need to be open to
Mm.
to the to the intuitive way of showing us that we are in the wrong path, let's say.
Mm.
We are using the wrong archetype because as we know, many times life gives us in a person the opportunity to see what we are doing not in the best way, in
Mm.
a book, in a podcast, in a
Mm-hmm.
in any other form. It's sending us messages of how we need to shift the route and redirect our pathway into a healthier way of being. And
Mm-hmm.
if we keep going in the wrong direction, we will find many times a closed end where we are going to suffer, where there is no other place to go but to go down. And probably you need that. Many times you need those traumatic
Mm.
experiences, as we mentioned also, so that you can change, so that you can realize that you
Yeah.
need to really make a big change in your life, no?
Absolutely. I try and avoid that. No, I'm joking. It's hard it can be hard. I don't want to say that it is hard because I don't want to plant any seeds, but it can be an uncomfortable situation because it's we're healing through that, but that opportunity is usually our greatest gift in turning our lives around. And a lot of the time when we do overcome these things, it actually births purpose in supporting other people that have gone through the same thing as well. So it's and not only that, those experiences will have a vibrational frequency that is within us that will call towards us people that have gone through similar experiences because the vibration is similar, especially if you've healed it. Because it's, well, I look at it from a healing holistic perspective just because of that's the world that I live in. But you will draw toward, like, so I'll draw towards me sometimes a lot of people that have had some of the same traumas or experiences that I've had, or something that I have that I can give, in a lot of that sense, you know. And it's quite interesting because you'll always resonate with your practitioners and your doctors
Mm.
and your psychologists. It's important to resonate with them because there is an aspect of a vibrational frequency that will support that person. And even in business, I mean, I've co-authored a planner or a methodology called the Octopus Method, and we talk about that from a business perspective, that, or from even a healing perspective, your clients or your best clients are who you were 3 to 5 years ago, because
Mm.
you've gone through all of that, you've experienced all of that, you've moved through that, which is important. And I think even within the medical field, there's a lot of doctors that specialize in one thing or another because they've had a family member, because they've had experiences going through that same thing, or what it may be. I don't know. Maybe you can talk more to that.
Yes, I mean we recognize our own pain, we recognize our own wounds, and we try to, as much as possible, to heal them. And many times, healing those wounds means choosing a career or a path that takes you through the knowledge of why it happened and why it
Mm-hmm.
keeps happening. If you are consciously mature, let's say, you will recognize that these patterns are not just in the biology, they are
Mm-hmm.
deeply rooted into more things, as you mentioned, the example of cancer, no? And any other disease, any other chronic disease is based on the emotions, is based on the psychology of thinking,
Mm-hmm.
is based on the boundaries that you don't have, or you have too much boundaries, whatever it is the case. And they are the environment, the interactions that we have with the environment are constructing a model so that you can see them. But
Mm-hmm.
if you don't want to see them, and if you keep thinking in just one direction and trying to uh, fix things, let's say, with that simple pill, you will just awaken more patterns of disease because you are not treating the unbalance factor that is rooted in the cause. You are just treating the symptom.
Mm-hmm.
Treating the symptom is just going to work for a while, and it's going to fix things for a very short period of time, and then it
Mm-hmm.
will reappear so that you pay attention. And what I also researched when I wrote this article about these archetypes, and what I am really passionate about now, is this quantum way of seeing the things, and
Mm-hmm.
this psychology that is developing, which is going to replace all of this medical system, is also speaking about biophoton emissions. So we have this light inside of us, and these biophoton emissions was introduced as a communication system within this biology. So it is these atoms that are constantly vibrating into a pattern, into a rhythm, and they are replicating this vibration throughout the body, throughout the system. And this emission of light that can be measured now could potentially be a way to measure the influence also of these archetypes, of this way of thinking.
Beautiful.
So this is the new medicine that I am seeing. This is the new medicine that I think that we can be scanned. And I was watching also a documentary that they are developing these quantum computers. I don't know if I remember correctly, but I think it was in Massachusetts somewhere, but because I didn't pick up the name of the city. But there is a laboratory where they are developing these computers, and the technology that they are developing is so that they can scan the body and they can tell you where exactly you have this kind of pattern, let's say, that is
Hmm.
disrupted. And once you find out this, then you can relate it to the biology. And then you can relate it to changing or shifting this pattern, and you can have a more specific protocol of treating the unbalance and going back into health, because your body is going to do all of the other things. You just have to give it the direction. the,
Hmm.
the other things, the body will do it because it knows how to get in balance. Your body was designed to be in balance.
Yeah,
You are the one that is taking the wrong direction many times and taking it into an unbalanced state, which reflects as a disease, no?
absolutely. And we do that in life constantly, whether it's kind of like following a career that our parents would like rather than our own, or following a
Mm.
career for money rather than passion, or whatever it may be, which is very, very fascinating. That technology excites me, actually, looking at the energetic frequencies and communication and what's happening within our body and being able to pinpoint that, which is pretty cool. So, one thing about recognizing patterns, and this is what you were saying earlier, is that once we recognize them, to continue to do them is choice.
Mhm.
When we're doing them unconsciously, it really is a subconscious program that we have no awareness of. But when we do have an awareness, it then becomes a choice. And then it's a conscious choice to continue to you know to do the same thing. So yeah, and I think, yeah, it's hard. Those patterns, those behaviors need to change as well.
It is so funny that also all of this work that is being developed through this wisdom of the psychology, the archetypes, the emotions, the conjunction of everything, also talks about this synchronicity. And Carl Jung also said that synchronicity might be a manifestation of the archetypes, which for me sounds completely normal, normal
Yeah,
and a wise way of detecting that you are not doing the right things, because this synchronicity will show you or bring you the examples and will activate your unconscious pattern so that you can externalize or express the things. And if you are conscious and mature, you will detect them or you will see them. If you are
yeah,
not, you follow the path and you get the disease, and all the cycle
well,
starts. No.
yeah. It's like finding out a pattern of the people you draw towards us
Mm-hmm.
generally tend to be the same, or dating the same type of person over and over again. I mean, they're different people, but they're the same person, the same patterns, the same traits, and it's within us. We're the common denominator. You know,
Yeah.
if we keep finding ourselves in that same position over and over again, like here I am again, you know, that is a clear indication that something's up and that perhaps you're not following your highest potential version of your blueprint and of what you're wanting to do. Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And that is a beautiful, and that's what's so beautiful about life, that if you miss one opportunity to learn, it will show itself again. And it's important to not resist these things, but rather choose them. Because that's the other thing. When we resist the change, when we resist not looking at it, the opportunities will continue to show up for us until we've actually moved through it. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's about choosing them. It's like, because when we choose them to overcome them, then we really are taking that responsibility and really working through it. And I think that is important. Once we recognize these things, it is easier and less painful to move with it, to feel it, to experience it, to understand it with a place of compassion and grace. And then the important thing is to action differently. And you're right, it all starts with our thought. Our mind controls our body in many ways. Our thought processes, our belief systems are the biggest influence on our emotions that I think influence our body.
Yes. They they are those also higher level patterns that we need to recognize, and we need to see them as either coherent or incoherent. No, if we
Mm-hmm.
are incoherent, then we are going also to create a different level of thought processes.
Mm-hmm.
We are in an incoherent state, which is represented mostly by this, let's say, label negative emotions like
Mm-hmm.
anger, like frustration, like anxiety, all of those, uh, let's say, negative patterns. You you recognize that you cannot think under those states, and you recognize that that level of frequency that you are sending to your body is just bringing up more disease, is bringing up more systems, more chaos into your life.
Mm-hmm.
If you remain in that state, if you shift from that state and you look for breathing exercises as we
Mm-hmm.
were speaking the last episode, then
Yeah.
you will create a coherence that is different, and your level of thought processes is going to be fixed into a more, let's say, synchronistic way of thinking that is
Mm-hmm.
going to bring you much better outcomes. No.
Yeah.
And
And sometimes it's working with those emotions though. So working with the emotion of anger in a way that is conducive, it's fire. And it's working with that aspect of, okay, anger is telling me that there's something wrong, right? It's like, and I think children teach us that. They feel their feelings 100% and then they move from them. But it's
mhm,
looking at where can I, like, what is giving that I need to be able to, where can I shift this energy into something that is positive, that is good, that supports what I'd rather be than what I won't. Because suppressing that, you'll find yourself angry again and frustrated and whatever it is that we're all going through as well. It's like you say, it's important. So we look at those as negative emotions, but it's like, what are they saying to us? And the quicker we understand what they're saying and move through it, I think the healthier it may be. Because the only thing that I'm worried about, like in the spiritual world, we do a lot of spiritual bypassing where we
mm,
don't feel our feelings because they're of a lower vibrational frequency or they're uncomfortable or I don't want to be in this low frequency. It's like we hit those lows because there is frequencies and patterns and conditioning and things like that. That's what's telling us, hey, something's not right, whether it be a thought process as a behavior. what those negative emotions come to show us is that, hang on a minute, there's something here that's not right. And
Mhm.
you're right, it's moving through them, but it's working with them and not bypassing them in a sense of kind of like going, hey, I can't feel this way. Yes, we absolutely need to unpack it to see what it is in order to not sit in it. I think
Mhm.
Louise Hayes used to say it's not good to sit in it. It's like you don't go into the bin to go get yesterday's dinner. You know,
Yeah.
you like you eat it, you move through it. You don't sit in your own vomit. You move through that. But it's debunking that I think is important, very much to do so as well. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was going to forget if I hadn't done that.
No, no, no. It was okay. I mean, it complements what I mentioned, and it gives us this um, power back to us, and also not. I also agree that that's why I quote negative
Mm-hmm.
and all of those
Yes.
things, because people say that they are negative, but they are not. They are
Mm.
just ways of showing you that you are not in alignment, that you are
Yeah.
not coherence, that you are not in your best self, let's say. And we are allowed to be in those states. We are allowed to be in those
Mm.
states. And we should recognize those states better so that if we need to be isolated for a period of time, we can be. If we need to do certain rituals or things that brings us into alignment, also
Mm-hmm.
we need to do them. I was watching a movie yesterday and they show a scene where this guy was being humiliated by his girlfriend in front of her friends, and he swallowed the anger a little bit. It is shown in the picture.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the next day he goes running and he fuels that energy into exercise. And that's what I used to do also. Many times
Mm-hmm.
when I felt whatever the emotion was, either sad or angry or any of those, moving my body and doing exercise bring me into a completely different state. Actually, it is in the book that I published one of
Yeah.
story that is completely my story, that
Mm-hmm.
it was the worst day of that stage of my life because I failed a very complicated subject in my master's degree. Then that same day, I was fired from the job that I had. And so I said, I don't know what else is going to happen, but I need to go and do exercise so that I can shift this.
Mm-hmm.
And that day, I met a woman, I met a girl that I was attracted to, and she was attracted to me. So it was like, but after the exercise. So I met her
Yeah.
after I did many swim laps, taking out the anger, taking out, transforming that anger, transforming that
Yeah.
frustration. And I took a shower, which is also a process of cleaning yourself. It's not just
Yeah.
physically
Absolutely.
cleaning, it's
Yeah.
cleaning these patterns of thinking. And once I got out, I was in a completely different state. I didn't care about any of the things that happened.
Yeah.
I said, well, I can do again this subject and I can get another job. And this was the best because I didn't get along with the woman that I had as a boss. So it was for good. And in that day, that's when I met this girl. So it is funny how just in the same day that you think that nothing good can happen, if you stop, make a reset, and
Mm.
physically do sometimes, well, for me it was physical. For many other people, can be a meditation, can be a breathing exercise, can be
Mm-hmm.
yoga, whatever it is that works for any of the listeners. They can do those things and shift the pattern of thinking, and then the energy is going to shift, and you are going to attract different things.
Absolutely. No, I was going to ask you, you're right on point. How do you work through that? Um, yeah, no, I tend to walk and I like I walk kilometers. But I sit with that thought process and I start looking at things from all different perspectives and I start to ask the question, why? How is this working for me? Where is this going? And a lot of the times I actually walk until I get the answer. So I get the understanding of what is the resistance on my end. What is the thought? What is the limitation on my end? What haven't I been seeing? Was it an expectation that I placed on something? And I was quite interesting because I was talking to a very good friend of mine the other day, and I said, when I go through these things, I open up a lot of tabs. There's a lot of tabs that sit there downloading the information as
Mhm.
to why. And as I walk, it's when I tend to allow that energy to move through my body and allow that thought process to kind of like those ideas, those perspectives from all other perspectives, that come in. And then it's like, oh my goodness, okay. Perhaps it was an expectation that was not met that I had no reason to put that in because this person's always been the same, but you've expected something different or whatever it may be, and I find that quite helpful for me as well is that movement um, in there or dancing to it's I think for me that's what I do or listening to my favorite music that helps to shift things.
Mm. Also, yes, 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 yes. So yeah, I mean, for you it's walking, and it starts or it ignites the same process that for me is swimming.
Mm-hmm.
During those laps of swimming, my thought process, I remember because I didn't have this with that knowledge and those things in
Mm.
my 20s. So,
Yeah.
but I remember perfectly what happened in my brain is that I kept replaying the scenario into a
Mm-hmm.
ruminative state until it changed,
Mm.
and it by itself it told me that it was the best for me, and then I
Yeah.
could see the, let's say, the light.
Yeah.
I could see the light. I could see the silver lining, let's say, of the thing that happened, and I could say, well, it was for the best. I didn't like that job, or I didn't like that teacher, and I didn't really learn what I wanted to learn, and
Mm-hmm.
then that was good for me. So, and
Yeah. Beautiful.
you close the process, no?
Yeah, I think you close the process and then you change the behavior and then you're a new person. Well, we changing who we are with every decision that we make
Mhm.
every second of the day, right? So it's we just don't make those many big changes that we don't realize, but yeah, sometimes when we hit those rock bottoms is when we do make those big changes and we emerge as a totally different person, um, which is beautiful as well.
And that's the transformation process that we spoke in the
Mm,
title. So that's the transformation that the archetypes do. That's the transformation that this holistic way of thinking can help you do
hmm
if you just allow to be open, to recognize your patterns, to recognize your mistakes, and to be humble that you are learning. We are all learning at all times,
We'll
and
never stop.
yes, it never stops. And the more humble we are, the easier the lesson will be. The more stubborn or ego narcissistic you are, the harder it will be. So
Yeah,
you better relax and take the lesson, and that's it.
absolutely. I agree. And I think the more conscious we become, the more healing we do, the more
Mhm.
we move through these situations with grace and with ease. And not that it not yes, it can become easy.
Yes, it can
Yeah, I
be.
don't want to set those limitations that it needs to be hard. It can be, but it doesn't have to be.
it's our choice many times.
Yeah.
It's in our own choice, and sometimes we need the hard lesson, sometimes we need the easy. So
Yeah.
we don't know
Yeah.
what it's gonna be.
That's what makes life so interesting.
Yes. So I think that we can wrap up and say that um, the message that we just want to transmit with this episode is that all our lives are filled with patterns because we are born into a society that is already in place. We are born into a culture that has already traditions and things and ancestral lineage also. And we just need to recognize those patterns and learn from them and move on. You know?
Yeah. With grace and with ease and with love and compassion for
Yeah.
self.
With
Yeah.
all of those ingredients, let's say.
Yes. I love that.
Thank
Perfect.
you, everyone. Thank you,
Thank you,
Natasha.
everybody.
Thank you
Thank you, David.
for being here and send those questions, send those things, send those stories of your own life where you have faced struggle or where it has been easy to reflect on your own patterns, and we will answer to them. Thank you. See you in the next
Thank
one.
you. Bye bye.
Bye.